All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenosha Davenport, so it's really great to see each of you again. I also wanted to make sure that I'm also becoming familiar with you all. And so if we can do a quick round of introductions, if you can give name, pronouns, and what is your current connection or relationships with board? Like, are you reporting to a board? Are you serving on the board? Or have no experience of connecting with boards all together? And that helps to give me an idea of who's all in the room.
I'll go ahead and go first. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dawn Anderson, and I am pronouns she and her. I serve on a board, and as a director of domestic violence with YWCA, I have attended every board meeting that we have. So I mean, I don't work directly with them, but I have a little bit of familiarity about what is happening. And I also help share some of the information that we provide to them either monthly or bi-monthly, depending on how we're meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. And just unmute and go as we're going through this so that we can get through it kind of quickly.
I can go since I'm here. My name is Deborah Lambert. I'm the Director of Programs with the Mary Parrish Center. My pronouns are she, her. I report to a board and I serve on 3 other boards.
I'll go. Carla Miranda, she, her. I'm pretty involved with our current board, so I attend all the board meetings and work together closely with our CEO. I'm reporting back.
I could go next. Hi everyone, Corinne Williams. I'm the programs manager at the Awake Shelter in Anchorage, Alaska. I have not had any type of communication or collaboration or partnership with our board. I actually just got permission from my ED 2 weeks ago to let me know that I could attend our April board meeting. So sorry. I'm super excited about that. I get to sit and observe.
I'll go. Hello, everyone. I'm Lakeisha Anthony.
Hey, Lakeisha, I don't know what happened, but you unmuted yourself in the middle.
Can you all hear me now? Okay. I said hi. I'm Lakeisha Anthony. I am the senior manager of advocacy at WAR Philadelphia Center Against Sexual Violence. I utilize pronouns she and her, and I do have limited connection with the board. We facilitate something called a mission moment, and I'm in charge of their mission moment to connect the board to why they're continuing to do this work. And I coordinate survivors to speaking with them. And then I've helped to present our end of the year report to the board at our annual board meeting.
I'm Nellie Guzman. I am the acting executive director at the Stay Sisters Circle. I use she, her pronouns. Prior to this position, I didn't have any real connection with our board, but been in this role for about a month now. I haven't had a board meeting with them, but have been meeting with them regularly just because a lot has been in flux with the organization.
Hello, everyone. Nilda Aldrich. I'm an integrated services team lead at Missy. I use she, her pronouns, and I have interacted with the board in different aspects. I am responsible for 3 grant reportings quarterly, and I interact with the board in delivering those. Also, fundraising events. I'm a part of the committee that puts them on, so I've interacted with a lot of our board members over the years for that. And my first board meeting will be tonight, actually. My ED has invited me to be a standing member at these meetings for the purposes of observation leap and then for whatever next position I may have.
I can go next. My name is Kashawn Austin. I'm HR director at Cornerstone. I don't have a lot of experience with our board. I worked with them to hire our current executive director, and then quarterly I give updates from the HR department, just like a summary, but I don't interact with very many on the board other than our board chair.
I can go next. My name is Anusha Sanai, and I am the managing attorney for the Tahrir Justice Center. I don't regularly interact with the board except for the DEI work that we do internally. I'm a co-chair of one of the DEI task force within the organization, and in relation to that, I make sure with my co-chair that the DEI framework is integrated with our internal processes.
Did we get everyone?
I think Vanessa has not gone yet. Oh, I think she's having connection issues.
I can
Oh, there you
go.
go. Okay,
I'm
go
sorry.
for
I
it.
don't know if you all can hear me. I'm having some major connectivity issues, which never happens. I'm so sorry about that. But are we doing just intros?
Yeah, so name, pronouns, what's your current connection or relationship to boards? Or are you reporting to a board, serving on one? Or do you have any connections?
Yeah. Yeah. So my name is Vanessa Torres. I use she, her pronouns, and the Associate Director of Social Justice at YWCA Golden Gate, Silicon Valley. My connection to boards right now in my current role is that I will sometimes present about special programs or initiatives going on within the realm of like prevention work and race equity work within our organization. I'll present that to the board, but maybe that happens like, I don't know, no more than 5 times a year. And my other, on a personal level, I actually just completed a board training through Center for Excellence in Nonprofits, a local organization in Silicon Valley. And so I did get some board training. The program was called Building Representative Boards. So it really focused on how to be a board member and how boards work, but from the lens of people of color.
Thanks, everyone. I think it helps me to kind of know where folks are in relation to boards because it can help guide our conversations. And so one of the things that we'll talk about start is kind of thinking about the roles and responsibility of board directors. A lot of times that's where a lot of the confusion comes in when we're thinking about how people view boards in general, how staff on an organization may see a board, how the board may interact on behalf of the organization, how the executive director or leadership team engages with a board of directors. And it all begins with understanding the roles of responsibility. Unlike our for-profit entities, the board of directors at a nonprofit organization are volunteers. They do not receive any funds in exchange for their services. And just wanted to talk a little bit about what are those services. And so when we look at the roles and responsibility of the board of directors, it begins with what are the legal duties, right? There are 3 legal duties for a board of directors, and that is the duty of care, duty of obedience, and duty of loyalty. Have any of you heard that before? You can show with a raise a hand. Some says yes, some says no. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about those. One of the things that I want to start with is encouraging you to take a look at what your state statutes say for your for the minimum requirements for operating, say, nonprofit corporations. So you'll find it under the section of corporations. So what are the guidance for corporations, and then a subcategory of corporations is nonprofit organizations, because essentially a nonprofit organization is a type of a corporation, right? And so sometimes we forget about that, and we try to make this huge distinction between 3M and our organization. In many ways, those organizations have some of the same legal requirements. So understanding what the law says. Each state has set aside some statutes that speaks to the minimum requirements of a board of directors for a nonprofit organization. And when we get to talking about the governing documents, we'll talk about how this should also be in line with what the law also says. So the three duties, let's talk a little bit about duty of care. Duty of care is making sure that as a board member, that you're taking care of the organization. So how might that care shows up? One is the making sure that they're providing fiscal oversight for the funds that the community, that stakeholders, that funders have provided to the organization. So that may look as simple as review monthly financials. If you're serving on the board and you're not reviewing financials on a regular basis, I'm going to say that's red flag number one. The inability to produce financials either monthly, at the very minimum, it should be quarterly. That's how you exercise your fiduciary responsibilities, is by reading those financials. And if you don't know how, begin to ask questions, at the minimum, you should be asking, taking a look at the personnel line, taking a look at what are we budgeting for in this organization. I know that you all had a wonderful session with Gloria, was able to talk budgets and stuff, but the budgets for me as a board member and as an executive director, it tells me a lot about the organization, right? And so as part of my duty of care, I'm double checking that the board, that the organization is paying for audits. That's going to be transparent in our financial reports. If we're not budgeting for audits, we haven't paid any money into audits, I then know, like, when's the last time this agency been audited? If I want to know, like, if I'm interested in, like, how are you taking care of staff and seeing that they're okay? As a board member, I'm looking for a staff appreciation line. I'm looking at personnel line. Did this amount increase from the previous year? Is there any bonuses outlined in the budget, or staff retention or hiring bonuses? If not, then as a board member, I'm asking those questions. Like, one of the things that we'll talk about is governance and day-to-day management. It is the role and responsibility of the board to provide that overarching governance, which isn't down on the ground doing day-to-day. The board sets the policies, the executive director, leadership team, or however the hierarchy is within the organization determine how to put that policy into practice, right? And so having the understanding of that difference. So if I want to know what it's like for a staff on the ground, what's their experience, I'm going to start by looking at the budget. I'm not going down there and saying, hey, Marcella, how's things going at Val? That's not where I'm going to start as a board member. That's something that the executive director should be doing. They can inquire about, like, how do you capture that information about job satisfaction? Is there a survey? Can I see the survey? And so understanding the distinction between governance and day-to-day. Then when we talk about duty of loyalty, we're talking about that they're loyal to the organization and its mission, not who's sitting in what seats, but to the organization and its mission. So when they're making decisions as a board member, does this further the mission? Does this align with our governing documents, such as our bylaws, whether we have philosophy statements, Maybe we have core values identified. Is the decision we're making today in alignment with our core values? You know, those are the questions that board members should be asking. If not, how do we get in alignment? What decision would be in alignment with our core values, our missions? You know, like if our mission is to work to end domestic violence and sexual assault, okay, and now we're gonna incorporate a Save the Well program. Is that within our mission? You know, and so using those guidance to make decisions for the organization. Is this something we value? You know, personally, we may want to save all the wells, but it's not within this organization mission. So this may be a funding that we don't want to pursue because it's outside, it's mission driven, right? And so that's also another example is duty of loyalty. For those of you that may serve on or are a part of a coalition, and most coalitions are built to where membership is recruited to be on the board. And so you go to that statewide coalition and you're making decisions on what's best for your individual agency. Well, if you do that, that's going to cause us to lose funding. And I'm quick to say, because I chair I'm the board chair for the Domestic Violence Coalition here and for the Sexual Assault Coalition. Not recommended to do both at the same time, but it is what it is. But I'm going to be the first to say, hey, that's you making a decision with your organization membership head on. I need for you to switch gears and put your head on for this organization. If I am a CPA and I'm encouraging you all to find a new auditor, by the way, I'm a CPA and I can be your auditor, right? Am I being loyal to the organization, or is that something that's self-motivating for me? That's the opportunity for me to secure another customer. So that decision will likely be in conflict with my duty of loyalty. And then when you talk about duty of obedience, we think about things like one sound, one voice. And so knowing that my individual power as a board member, even that of the board chair, is but one vote. And that if it's not the will of the majority of the board or whatever our bylaw says our majority is, then we shouldn't be behaving in that manner. So for instance, if as a board, we've made a decision to release this statement about a recent harmful act in the community, right? And then you have 2 or 3 board members saying, well, they passed that, but I didn't really believe that. I don't support that. I'm in violation of that duty of obedience. And so understanding what those legal duties was. Also, when you think about duty of obedience and duty of care, that also gets to being mindful about your presence and your attendance. So someone who isn't attending meetings and then they're showing up and voting all over the place for everything. And it's just like, how are you exercising care? You're rubber stamping. And as someone who reports to a board, I prefer questions before something is approved. Like, ask those questions. I don't need a group of yes people. I need people who are able to challenge me in a respectful way, and make sure that I'm not missing any risk or liabilities for the organization too. And so also in those duties is understanding that we serve as an ambassador for the organization. Most of the time when I sit on board interviews or I come across an applicant and it's like, yeah, I've been able to watch y'all and see what y'all have been doing and I want to know how to do that. I look at my board and I said, no, absolutely not. If people want to learn from me and learn what's in my sauce, they need to call it ascendant concepts, right? Not join my board, learn my secrets, and then go out and use them. No, 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 no. I'm looking for people who are going to give their time, talents, and expertise to pushing the organization forward. I can't push the organization forward if I'm having to train my board how to board. And so really understanding why people are joining the board. Well, I'm running for city council and I thought this might, no, you're gonna have to go clean up your image somewhere else. I need people who are gonna be engaged in the work, right? Well, not engaged in the work. I want to be careful how we say that. I want them to be engaged in serving on the board. I like to make a distinction between engaged and active board members, because people will recruit active board members. And when we hear the word, what most people hear is like, I'm going to be boots on the ground, doing that direct services with the other advocates. And I'm like, that's called our volunteer program, and I can put you in with our volunteer coordinator. I need board members who are going to govern. So this is this very high level. If you're seeing them too much on the ground, I can see why you're having some of the issues that you're having within your organization. And one of the ways in which we convey the roles and responsibilities is education, right? Doing the orientation. If you're covering all things domestic violence and sexual assault, and you're not talking about the way in which a board should operate, and then they start causing problems. Here's me. My first question is, what is that orientation process look? What does the recruitment? Because when I see that somebody comes in and they have their pen and paper ready and they're like, I am going to get this place into shape. I'm just like, oh, can you tell me a little bit about how they recruited you? And then I'm going back to my governance committee and we'll reminding them about the words we say when we're recruiting, is really setting the expectation about that. Oh, Kashawn, let me know if I say someone's name incorrectly. Great question. Ideally, it is the role. Kashawn's question was, who is responsible for keeping the board and its members accountable? Ideally, it is the board chair. That seat on the board is the most critical seat. If you put a strong leader in there, you will have a strong board. A strong board leads to a strong and healthy organization. A weak board chair leads to chaos. And so sometimes people are recruiting, it's like, we just need a chair, just come on in, it doesn't take much. But then chaos starts happening. That person that you told doesn't require much isn't answering emails, isn't answering phone calls, isn't returning email, they're not responsive. And this is how I get stuck in the board chair position, is because I tend to be responsive, and they also have to be okay with conflict. Because when we talk about the duty of care, it's not only care of the organization, but care of the board in itself. The board should be doing the recruitment. The board should be orientating each other, and the board should be dealing with board issues. So if board member A and board member B don't get along and always are arguing, that's on the board chair to call that. Hey, here's our working agreements. Here's how we plan to work with each other. Yes, some places call it the board president, some places call it board chair, but essentially it is that person who is in that chair or president position that is responsible for keeping the board. A lot of times what we see instead in nonprofits is the ED. And as I tell my board and boards I serve on, we shouldn't be in opposition with board. So if I have a board problem, I'm bringing it to my chair. my chair and I will strategize, and then that chair is going to go in there and resolve that and provide me with an update. The strategy that has worked for our organization is the expectation to have the board report out to the organization as a whole, so as to provide an update on the board vision and alignment with the mission. We also have a board liaison who connects with staff to hear about questions, concerns, and ideas. And so that's one strategy, and I would love to hear how that's helpful. Because one of the things too that I make known, the board has one employee, and that is the executive director. The executive director may have many employees, but the executive director also have many bosses that should be acting together with one voice, right? And so understanding the difference, sometimes when I have individual board members reaching out about certain things or want to put a new requirement on something that I must do, and my follow-up question is always like, oh, was this decided in the committee? Was this talked about at the full board meeting and I somehow missed it? Let's refer back to the committee and see if they have any thoughts on this, right? Really understanding and redirecting when you need to is critical. A lot of time I encounter EDs who are just nervous as all get out when it comes to the board. While I do have a little bit of nervousness, most of all, more importantly, I know my value. And because I know my value and I'm at a different season in my career, I can clearly state what I will and won't permit. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm sorry, my team isn't going to be able to do that. So granting like board members passing on work assignment to staff, that's a no here. That's a no on the boards that I serve on. You know, I recall one of the boards I served on, and they had a secretary who was, you know, listed on all the things, but the secretary never took minutes. She brought in some of the administrative staff and had them taking minutes. So when it came time as under my new role as the board chair to elect new officers, I sidebar with her. If you run for secretary again, you will take minutes. You will make them available in advance of the meeting. If not, please step aside. We're releasing staff from this duty because the board should be taking care of its own duties. And that secretary duty includes that meeting, the minutes, the agenda, and you know, the record keeping for the organization. If you're not prepared to do it, please step aside. And she stepped aside, and we got a really great, phenomenal person who was excited about minutes. And so understanding what those roles are is important. So making sure you're taking time to review the guiding documents. Oftentimes the original bylaws are created and they're never looked at again. If you're serving on the board, the bylaws should be available. Folks should have their bylaws with them because you're making decisions. And oftentimes, if you're like me, serving on multiple boards, I don't know which board is what, so I have to have my bylaws pretty close to me, right? You know, are we at quorum? If we're not at quorum, then we can't vote on anything, right? And so having a clear understanding of what the guiding documents say, because it governs how we interact with each other, and it tells us what our powers are as a board of directors. And one of the things that many nonprofits fail at is identifying term limits. So the board president has been the board president for 20 years. I don't even want a president for 20 years. We struggled through the 4 that we have a president, right? So why do you think if it's not good for the nation, then why would it be good for an organization? You want new ideals and voices coming to the table. If not, an organization becomes stagnant. And when it becomes stagnant, it becomes the blockbusters of nonprofit, right? It starts to fizzle and draw good to its community. And so understanding that recruitment piece is critical. Right? Other documents we talked about was the mission and that vision. One of those of you that may be working with the board, does anybody have any idea when was the last time you took a look at your bylaws or your mission and vision statements? Anyone?
We look at our mission and vision during every monthly or bi-monthly meeting that we have, but the only time I have seen us review and or discuss the bylaws is during like our annual orientation, and or if we are onboarding new board or committee members and we have an orientation, then we review the bylaws, but it's not something that we look at regularly. So I appreciate you saying that you should keep your bylaws close so that you know what should and should not be happening.
Yeah, because if someone, one of the things, there's some ups and downs about Robert's rules. Now that I kind of know them, I really appreciate them, because if your bylaws specify that you're acting under Robert's rules of order and somebody brings something out of turn, like that's not on the agenda, then we can sidebar that very quickly, very easily, and move forward with our agenda. But if someone is, if we're down a few people and people's like, oh, let's just go ahead and vote. Well, if I know that somebody was in opposition and they're not present, I may say, hey, we're not at a quorum, so how are we going to vote on this, right? And so it's super important, but it's also important to take a look at the bylaws and see what it says about term limits. How long can someone serve on your board? How long can someone serve as the board chair, right? What are the requirements for serving on the board? Some organizations have a give-get. Is a give-get policy mean that you have to either give a certain amount or you have to go out and get a certain amount? Does that allow for diverse individuals? I tell many organizations like, oh, if you have a give-get policy, don't invite me to the board. I have many talents, but A, giving you a bunch of my money is not one. B, I don't necessarily have a group of friends who want to be like, oh, we got 10 grand to give out. I don't have that circle. So if you have a give-get, it would keep someone phenomenal like me, right, out of that space. You don't want to miss out. So thinking about how bylaws were originally created, right? A lot of it was about closing off access to folks. Most folks, before I got into this movement, I didn't want to join a board. What is this thing called board, right? And so we have to do more to kind of demystify, what does the recruitment look like? And so making sure that you're taking time to say, hey, it's been 2 years since we looked at those bylaws. Are the things that we said then still relevant today? We're serving multiple counties, but our bylaws doesn't speak to that representation, right? Because some people will bake in representations into the bylaws, which then means that we have to be intentional about the areas that we serve. Some people may have like some boards, because we were born out of like women's rights and movement, some boards still say that 51% of our board of directors must be women. It's when we understand that there are there's different ways in which folks identify, right, as far as gender. Is that a valid statement anymore, right? And so taking time to kind of meter your bylaws against the changes, in our society too. We had what we believe to be good reason to have that back then, but does it still apply today? So how many of you had the opportunity Kareem?
Yeah,
Kareem?
it's Corinne. I just had
Corinne?
a question. When you said, like some boards can say, oh, I want all our board members to be women. So there's no, I'm trying to figure out how to like form this question. Are boards covered under like equal, like the EEOC like laws? So like, can you say, I just want all my board of directors to be persons of color or women of color? Can you specify that? Or is that something you
Historically, we have, right? When you look at a lot of the founding organizations, they did have those stipulations because they wanted to protect the space. They didn't see domestic violence or sexual violence as a issue for men as well, but now that we kind of know differently, while women are primarily the victims and survivors that are impacted, none of us are immune to that. So early on, some orgs do. And then you have some culturally specific orgs that may have rules about what the demographics should be, right? And so that doesn't, because these people aren't employees, that doesn't necessarily meet EEO. EEO is about employees. These are volunteers.
Thank you.
Yeah, but here's me. Does that produce the best result? Not necessarily. Okay. So how many of you had the opportunity to complete the board matrix? Who has a general idea? Put in chat, like, who's on your board? What professionals or like their jobs, like who's on your board? One of the things when people reach out for technical assistance and they're telling me like, oh, such and such is going on in my org, I'm like, oh, let me go over here and see. Let me see who's all on the board, because that's going to tell me so much between who's on the board, what's in their budget. I already know some of the things that are happening within that organization. It puts me in the mind of the Children's Theater here, which was under decades and decades of scandal for child sexual abuse. And when Minnesota in 2017 or 18 removed the restrictions of the reporting like the restriction of when folks can, the deadline for reporting child sexual abuse, they did away with it. And when survivors came forward, one who's a very public person for this scandal, and she lost the case against the organization itself, but won her case against the individual. And so the board of directors decided to sue her to the tune of $300,000 to get back their legal fees. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, let me go see who over here on the board. And it was full with like all of the big businesses in town, 3M, Best Buy, Target, like the headquarter people. And I was like, that's why they made that decision. They saw it as a business transaction and no one thought about community response. And not only that, the individuals were guilty. So as the board, the buck really stops with you and the executive director. So if and the employees guilty, you guys are guilty too. And so understanding that, sometimes I see boards that are full of heart, right? Everybody's a social worker. Well, those individuals don't necessarily make the most financial sense. Oh, we should give Kenosha more time because we just love her. Well, Marcella makes the same request. She's not the crowd favorite, and they tell her no. I'm not gonna do that. We made a one-time exception. So that puts the agency at risk, making these policies in a reaction to an individual instead of making policies proactive in the beginning, you know. And so one of the things I'll say on the board, and I was like, I know this isn't going to be everybody's favorite thing to see, but if you're not going to make a policy for the most unlike staff person, don't be making it for the most like staff person. Right? You know, don't have a maternity leave, and the crowd favorite now is needing maternity leave, and so you make all this, then the next person come and try to activate that. Oh, we just did this one-time thing. And I can tell by looking again at the board, you know, because truly to run an organization, you need that financial and that heart, right? Because if you're just making all business sense, you're going to lose people. But if you're also leading with a lot of heart, you're putting yourself at risk. And you really need the marriage of the two to balance the organization out. So I see some have educators, engineers, city officials, bankers, 60% persons of color. Some have 2 CPAs, yikes. A development manager for another nonprofit. Is that in an adjacent field or in the same field? Because I have rules about, every once in a while I get someone that's an ED of a domestic violence or sexual assault program that wants to be on my board. I said, no, that person's looking for my consulting. They want to know how I'm having success. They really need to go over there and click on my link and pay me for my services. You can't join my board for that.
They're in adjacent
okay.
nonprofits.
Adjacent.
It's not in a DB space.
Okay, good. Because sometimes when it's like the competition on the board, and I'm just like, oh, now I have to reserve everything I say because something in the making, not yet, or grants that I'm exploring, I don't want this person taking and be like, yeah, let's go look at the McKnight Foundation, you know, and then before I know it, I don't get it, they get it. Well, it wasn't even on your radar. So understanding that, but taking a look and making sure that you have a good sampling of folks on there, right? Do you have an attorney? And knowing that not all attorneys are created the same, right? So maybe y'all are doing a capital campaign and you're looking at building a new facility. Excellent time to have a development person on your board and or a real estate attorney, right? Boom. However, if I'm needing advice about an HR issue, I don't want that real estate attorney giving me advice. That's not their area of expertise. Just like if you were giving birth, you don't want the podiatrist. You want the person that specializes in OBG, right? And the same thing, not all attorneys are created alike. So you're doing a recruitment for attorneys, but specifically, what is the need? Is it employment law? Right? Is it real estate? Is it criminal? Is it civil? Like so many types, right? And so being very clear and specific and knowing what that person is going to bring to the table. If you don't have an HR department or someone that, you know, or maybe it's just one individual. So recruiting people with human resource background. You're looking at doing an overhaul in the next year of your job description and your handbook. It's great to have people on there that have some knowledge, because if not, and you got all that hard on there, they filled your stuff with so much stuff that you can't even afford it. Because with your HR policy, everything comes with a price. Now we're going to give everybody 100%. We're going to pay for insurance 100%. And I need the person on the board saying, who's going to pay for that? You came in last meeting and you said the funding money is drying up. And now you've created this HR policy that equals more money. Where are we going to get that 80,000 to cover insurance? Oh, but we want to support the people. We want to support the people too, but we want to make sure we got money for that, you know. So really understanding what people are able to bring to the board. I see some others, a DEI personnel, a mixture of 8 females, 3 men, majority white, 1 Black, 1 Asian. Oh, we have a lieutenant, so law enforcement, 2 attorneys. And, and that's something that we also have to think about in this movement, right? At some point, we became so enmeshed with systems that most of us had law enforcement on board. And it's hard to speak out against bad behavior if your board is oversaturated with law enforcement. So how can you advocate for systems change and then you have an individual on your board? It's like, nah, we don't see that as a problem. Well, you have to understand they're stressed and we're all stressed, but not some of us elect to do things, right? And so having an understanding of how the makeup of that board can impact the outcomes for that organization and why it's critical to have different voices at that table. Someone said a lawyer, accountant, police officer, and educator, a tribal VP, a tribal corporation VP, shareholder. So these are all sounds like most of you have a lot diversity among your boards, which is good because that hasn't always been the case. The board has, most historically boards have been filled with dominant culture. Boards have been designed by dominant culture. And so with that becomes, some part of it has, those white supremacy tendencies. And so does your bylaws and board practices and recruitment practices keep folks out? Because your board should be representative of the communities you serve. A great exercise for you to do with your board is say, hey, let's go to the census, even though we know the census doesn't capture all people, but it could capture a majority of folks, and say, does this board, is it reflective of our community? If not, that becomes a foundational piece in our matrix, right? Our goal as a board is to be reflective of the community. So if 10% of the community are, Native American, where are their voice on this board? And so using that matrix to say, here are the gaps, and then taking those gaps and kind of stacking it, right? So I'm just not looking for an individual that is a Black person. I may be looking for an attorney. And so then if that's what I'm looking for, then I may put an appeal out to the Association of Black Lawyers. Right? So that's an individual that not only meets the demographic, but they also meet the skill I'm looking for too, right? And really helping your board to kind of see those recruitment strategies. We have about 6 minutes, so I want to pause here and see what questions do folks have about what I said. We will have a second part to this next week, and so there's more to it. But I do want to hear what kind of questions came up for you all, whether it's questions from the homework assignment or from working with your matrix or something that came from what I said. You can either unmute or put it in chat if you like. I think having a survivor advisory committee and or having a representative is important. It's important that survivors are at the table. When we think about how this movement began and where we're at now, the over professionalization of our movement, right? We essentially now as an organization tell people they're too damaged to be a part of the advocacy movement. it is how the advocacy movement is built, right? Victims and survivors. And so I encourage organizations to kind of rethink that process of how can we have survivors at the table. Questions?
I had a question.
Yes.
So I'm struggling with my organization with just like a lack of transparency. So when I said, I've been working here for 5 years and I've been in management here for 3 years, and this will be my first time attending a board meeting. And I actually had to fight to be invited to this meeting. I actually found our bylaws, read them, found that we adopt the Open Meetings Act. And so I felt justified last month to just kind of show up at the board meeting, and my ED turned me away. She told me I could not. So can you speak to like a level of like just transparency when it comes to the board? Like because my board feels very much coveted. It feels like we don't have access to the board. My ED was very reluctant to even share some of the information that she did share with me. We didn't have a conversation. She sent me the board members list that has like their information, demographics, job titles, how long they've been in their positions, when their term ends, and they did a board deck self-assessment. So I don't know. I struggle with the lack of transparency when it comes to boards. Like my idea that I have of boards is just the one that I have experienced the past 5 years, which is just no transparency. Never met these people ever in my life. But they are making all the decisions, and yeah, we don't talk to them.
Yeah, so I think in general, right? I'm speaking in very general terms. One of the things that I encourage boards to do is develop staff reporting, which means that, like, for instance, here at this organization, every other month, my staff complete a board report that goes to the board of directors that is included in the board packet. But also every month, one person, and it's a rotation, because we have 12 meetings a month. So one person gets the opportunity to present with the board, tell them, like they have like a 10-15 minute window of like sharing who they are, what their role is, what are some successes and challenges with that role. And so that kind of demystifies that. Also, once a year, my board comes in and do a training for staff on like roles and responsibility of the board. So staff has a clear idea of what is in the board's domain and what's in the executive director's domain, right? If and really understanding that, right? Because the board shouldn't be involved with day-to-day management, but they shouldn't also be a mystery like this very obvious being, right? And occasionally, and I try to encourage EDs, don't make it a staff versus board issue. Like, for instance, if staff is asking for additional PTO, the ED doesn't feel like staff needs additional PTO. And instead of saying, I'm not in support of this idea, the executive director comes back and says, the board is not in favor of this idea. So that immediately pits staff against board instead of saying, I don't think we're yet ready to have additional, and here's my reasoning why, right? And then creating opportunities for staff and board to connect outside of the fundraiser from time to time, which we slowed down a little bit in COVID. But sometime 2 or 3 board members would get together and put together ice cream social at our office, and that way they kind of get to know people in this very public thing. But also, if people's goal to talk and interact with the board is about reporting the ED, here's me. Here's the email. Here's the link. Here's our grievance policy, right? Like, and understand that we shouldn't be in duplicitous relationships with our board. Like, I have friends outside of this organization. I don't have to go out and have drinks with my board. I don't have to go out and have drinks with my staff. I have friends outside of here. So I hold really tight boundaries. And when you stop doing that, that's when chaos is starting to happen, right? And so if I know somebody coming into my board or interested in the board is also bestie with somebody on staff, that's probably a conflict for me. And do know that my experience as an ED and the rules and stuff is with my lens of life as a Black woman in leadership, right? And so I have to navigate differently. And I don't know what type of, who's EDing at your organization, but I know that other EDs navigate in a very different way. I tend to try to demystify the board because I don't want those tense moments or people not feeling like there's no transparency. But ideally, I also don't want board too much on the staff stuff. Because
So
sometimes
that
they have great ideas that aren't great ideas.
So that was my question. Like you kind of touched on it about in reference to like not too much on the staff stuff of like how much should the ED in a sense gatekeep their staff from the board because of things that the board might bring up or targeting a specific individual and things of that nature and not sharing specifically things of the ins and out of everyday practice of what's happening within the org.
Well, it's one of those things that's really a slippery slope, right? And you must have good balance in it. When it comes to someone saying, you know what, I wouldn't have Kenosha because XYZ. You don't have the authority to have Kenosha anyway because she's not the executive director. It's my response, right? And so in that sense, you're protecting who you're bringing in the door, right? Or a board member saying, oh, I met Lakeisha at the fundraiser, just rubbed wrong. We don't want board making those kind of decisions, right? And so it's really a very fine line in that. And there's some protections in there, but what it really amounts to is who's in the EDC and how they navigate that space. For instance, too, if you have, but if you're in an organization and you're having problems, then yes, you want a grievance process. And so that should be spelled out in the handbook. Anytime people pursue me for an ED role, my question to the hiring committee is like, what is your grievance policy? What does that process look like? Because as an executive director, I don't want to be called on carpet every time somebody's unhappy with me. But if they took the time and energy to write something and follow the process, by means, give them an audience. It's not just, so someone asked about evaluation. So some organizations do 360s. As like I said, my point of view is from that of being Black in leadership. During my first 3 years, I absolutely discourage it. A 360 evaluation, because the minute I come in a mainstream organization, there are people that instantly are not my fan. I know that. That has been my experience. This is the 4th organization I've led. Right. But I do a little bit of protecting my assets. I actually do a job satisfaction survey before I get there, before my day one. So when they come in and say Kenosha wrecked the kumbaya that we were, let's go to question 5. Look at this. I feel alone at work. I feel isolated. There's no clear roles and responsibilities, okay? Because sometimes that change. But now that I've been here 5 years, one of the ways that I do it with the boards I serve on, I send out a survey. Because I don't want to hear about when Kenosha told you a no. As I tell people, don't be okay with my yeses if you're going to have a problem with my no. She told me I couldn't take PTO this day. What specifically about her job tasks and responsibilities do you have a problem with? She's late with payroll. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's something I want to know. We aren't being paid on time, right? She comes in the office and physically touch people, right? You can hear her scream. Like, those are the things we want to know. And so we do that through survey form versus someone taking notes and reporting back. And so that can be done, right? But it's also one of those things that can also be slippery slope. If you know that we're in a lot of change for this organization, you're hiring me and saying this place is jacked up. And now you want to do a 360 survey in that very same first year. Absolutely, you will not. Because nobody likes me because I fixed the stuff that y'all done hired me and told me was jacked up. Give me time to get folks back settled down, right? But then too, as an ED, I continue to do those job satisfaction surveys. And so my board has a clear idea. Folks feel like communication in the organization is low. Here's what we're doing to work on that as a team. Right? So not just financials, that is, because even financials is like a team effort. I know that I've went over just a little bit. I apologize. But those were good questions. Definitely think of more between now and next week, and let's talk more.
Thank you, Kenosha. Always so insightful and make it such a much more accessible conversation about working with boards. So appreciate you and thank you all for staying a little bit later. I will send the recording out either later today or early tomorrow. So you'll be able to rewatch if you'd like. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.